Hey everyone, welcome back to bageltcg. Today I'm happy to bring you a deck that I think is super fun and kind of exploring a new space in Flesh and Blood that we haven't been to yet, right? So we're looking at Dorinthea AXES today. Something very similar to this list, almost this exact same list. Made it to a top 4 at the ProQuest I went to last Sunday. So really solid finish, beat everything in the metagame. It seems like it only struggles against maybe Viscerai. It seemed to have some trouble into. I think Viscerai was actually its only 2 losses was to Viscerai twice, but beat pretty much everything else. Right, has really solid game into the meta right now, and it just got a lot of new tools. Right, so we're gonna hop right into it and look at what makes AXES Dory kind of this new and revitalized deck. Right, it kind of existed before, but now it's a solid contender in the metagame. Right, so let's look at the, as it calls on FABDB, the loadout first. We've got our axes. We've got Hatchet of Body, Hatchet of Mind, right? They each cost 1 to attack with. You can attack with them once per turn, and they swing for 2. If you've attacked with the other hatchet this turn, it gets +1, right? So for Hatchet of Body, if you have attacked with Hatchet of Mind, it gets +1, and vice versa, right? So the first one you attack with is for 2, and then the second one's for 3. Very nice, right? And it's only if it was the last attack, right? Our headpiece is Arcanite Skullcap. We're trying to have like the full fridge, right? Being able to block really well with all our equipment. So Arcanite Skullcap for blocking. Brave Forge Bracers for blocking as well for our arms. Actually has a pretty relevant effect. A lot of times you'll have one resource floating, and the effect is your next weapon attack gets +1, but you only activate it if a weapon has hit this turn. But sometimes you'll have a resource floating, you'll have gotten some damage in, so you might actually get, +1, +2, +3, a few extra damage in throughout the game because of Brave Forge Bracers. So really good arm piece, definitely kind of a must here. Fiendal Spring Tunic is our chest piece. Extra resources are really nice, and unfortunately, Courage of Bladehold does not work with axes. It's only like swords and daggers, I think. So because we're on axes, we cannot use Courage of Bladehold other than just for blocking. So the extra resources from Fiendal Spring Tunic is really nice. I think it's the most common equipment in the game right now. It probably always has been, but I feel like every deck is running Tunic right now. Like the top decks are like, other than the Rune Blades, I guess, most people are on Tunic. Null Rune Hood, that's going to be our Null Rune or Arcane Barrier equipment. So when we play against any kind of Rune Blade, we'll be bringing in this one Null Rune Hood. And then kind of the star of the deck is Valiant Dynamo. So Valiant Dynamo blocks for 1, it's battle worn. And at the beginning of your end phase, if you've attacked with 2 or more weapons this turn, you remove a -1 counter from Valiant Dynamo. So it just lets you block with it over and over again. This kind of incentivizes a 2-2 style of play, which means you block with 2 cards and then keep 2 cards to attack with. It's just a really nice style of play that I personally enjoy. So you're kind of blocking with 2 cards plus Valiant Dynamo, so about 7 block a turn, right? So almost all your cards I think block for 3. So you're blocking with like 2-3 blocks and Valiant Dynamo for 1. And then you get to keep 2 cards, and those 2 cards will let you pitch 1 and then use the other to get go again on your hatchets. You can also do a 3-1 or 4-0 style with this deck, which means you're keeping 4 cards or keeping 3 cards. You can't efficiently do a 1-3 style because you do need 2 cards at least to make your axes get go again and stuff like that. But the deck kind of can do all of it, and Valiant Dynamo just puts in so much work. In a lot of games, it might get like 5-6 block in, right? It can just block for an incredible amount. And it's one of the best equipment in the game when you actually get it to work. And one of the ways you get it to work is this amazing new card from Everfest called Blade Runner with our Mechanologist Warrior. Everyone's been saying it. Everyone's saying we're gonna have a Mechanologist Warrior in the next set or coming soon because this warrior is very steampunk. They got steam coming out of their legs. They've got like a technology blade or something. So maybe that's something. But anyways, we're running online of this card. It's pretty absurd. It's very good. Blocks for 3, like most warrior cards. It's an attack reaction. It costs 1. You target a one-handed weapon, and it gets go again. And then your next weapon attack this turn gets +1, +2, or +3, right? Very good effect. It basically gives you guaranteed go again for the cost of 1 resource. one resource is exactly what we want to be paying for our go again, because it lets us pitch a blue, swing for one, pay one for our go again card, and then pay one for the other attack, right? And that turn gets our counter off Valiant Dynamo. That's kind of the 2/2 style I was talking about. One blue to pitch, and one cost card to give our go again, plus a buff, right? The classic example is kind of Warrior's Valor. The red is a one resource for +3, and if your attack hits, it gets go again. Kind of similar there. So that is what these Blade Runners are for. Very good cards. These Command and Conquers, one of our worst matchups is Prism. It's kind of always been one of Dorinthea's worst matchups. It's still one of the worst matchups, right? But we try to fix that, and Command and Conquer is part of that. These are mostly in here for Phantasm blocks. There might be other scenarios, maybe against Ranger you bring them in, but that's mostly what they're for, is maybe Ranger and some Prism. Flock of the Featherwalkers is not a card I had in my build, but actually makes a lot of sense. So it costs 1, and it swings for 5. As an additional cost to play it, you reveal a card with cost 1 or less in your hand, and then you get a Quicken token, right? A Quicken token lets you do some really big turns on your next turn, because when you attack with a weapon, it pops the Quicken token, and that weapon attack gets go again, right? It also works on attack action cards, but we're obviously going to use it on a weapon most of the time. So this kind of sets up a future big turn, and it's still a pretty solid rate for a 1 for 5. It does block for 2. It's one of the only 2 blocks in the deck, but actually might be the only 2 block. No, it's not the only 2 block, but it's one of the only 2 blocks. So really solid card. The other 9 of is our Hit and Run here. This is our other guaranteed go again card. Blocks for 3 as well. This one is an action, but it costs 0, and it just gives your next weapon attack go again. Also, if you've attacked with a weapon already this turn, your next attack gets either +1, +2, or +3. So this is actually good on like the second attack. If you're going to be able to do a 3-weapon attack turn with Dory's hero ability, you can start with a Blade Runner and give your first weapon. It'll just swing for 2 or whatever, but it'll get go again and whatever the buff is. So let's say our hand is like a blue pitch, Blade Runner, Hit and Run, right? We play the red Blade Runner. The first swing for the axe is just for 2, right? But it gets go again, and our next swing is going to get +3. Then we play this Hit and Run for another +3 and giving this one go again, right? So now we're getting +6. It's also going to get +1 from itself. So we're swinging for 9 on the second hatchet. If it hits, it'll activate Dory, and then our next weapon attack will be able to attack with it again, right? So basically then we can swing again with the hatchet and get another 3 in there. Or if we hit with the first one, get a 3 in there, right? So that's a 14 damage turn, which is pretty solid. I do think you need 2 pitches for that unless you have a tunic counter. And then I think you can do it with 4 resources because it's 3 weapon swings and a Blade Runner. So 4 resources there. So yeah, you do need a blue plus a tunic counter or 2 cards to pitch for that. But it's a pretty solid turn. And the main thing is it also gets off Valiant Dynamo. So, when you're attacking and you're removing the counter from Valiant Dynamo, your attacks are also, blocking in a way, right? I think I'm taking a while here, so we're going to go through a bit of it a bit faster. So, Nourishing Emptiness, you keep 1 or 2 in the main deck, usually just 1 in the main deck. You can bring the second in against Prism and stuff you want to pop Phantasm. It's not even bad to play 2 in the main deck, so you probably do that sometimes as well. If you've played no other attack action cards, it has Dominate, and if it hits, you get +1 Intellect. We do actually play the Flock, so not as good as in a traditional Dory, but these are mostly Phantasm poppers as well. Lead the Charge is another tech for Prism. This is a 0-cost action. The next time you play an action card with cost 0 or greater, you gain an action point. So getting an action point instead of go again plays around, ALS or any kind of other auras we want to pop. So if we play Lead the Charge and then play any of our other actions, because they just need 0 or greater, so we play Lead the Charge and then Hit and Run, we'll get an action point. So we'll have 2 action points, and we can pop 2 auras, for example, with 1 with each hatchet. Out for Blood's a really good reaction in our deck. Cost 1, it's an attack reaction. It gives target weapon attack either +1 or +3, and then reprise triggers, which means if they're defending with a card, if your opponent's defending with a card from their hand, your next attack gets +1, which is true for both. So it's kind of a 1 for 4 on the reds, which is really solid. Just a pretty good rate. and we need some amount of reactions in the deck, and this one doesn't have too much of a loss if you don't trigger a reprise. We're playing these are three Everfest cards here. This 3 Outland Skirmish. It's basically a better Sharpened Steel in our deck. It costs 0. It gives our next one-handed weapon attack +3. And then whenever the next time a weapon hits this turn, we get a copper token, right? So another way to make some copper. It's basically just Sharpened Steel that creates a copper on hit. Our best go again card in our deck is these 3 Spoils of War. Cost 1, our next weapon attack gets +2 and go again. So just kind of strictly just the best version that we can get. I mean, if we could play like 15 of these, we would. Whenever a weapon hits this turn, we get 2 copper. So if both of our weapons hit while we have this, or if we hit 3 times with the weapon that turn, we'll get 6 copper, which is actually why we're playing this 1 cash in here. Because with these 2 cards, we can actually get to 4 copper somewhat easily. Unless we think the opponent's blocking a ton. If we're against like a full control deck, we can take out these cash-ins. But if we're playing against a more aggressive deck that's not going to be always blocking everything we throw at them, we keep that cash-in in. It's a yellow, so we can pitch it early if we're not at 4 copper when we draw it. And, at some point we'll get to 4 copper, and this will just be a really amazing card. We've got Spill Blood. This is kind of the reason to be on AXES. It's an amazing card. It costs 1. It gives all AXES you control +2 and Dominate until end of turn. So both AXES get it. It's a 1 for +4, essentially, and gives them Dominate. It works very well with the Steelblade Supremacy. Steelblade Supremacy is the classic Dorinthea specialization. It costs 1. You target a weapon, so not both weapons, but you target a weapon and it gets +2, and whenever it hits, draw a card. So together you can give one weapon +4 with these. It'll have Dominate, so it'll hit pretty easily. The first time it hits, as long as it has Go Again, it'll trigger Dorinthea so it can attack another time, and then you can hit it with it again. So you can draw 2 cards and deal, +4, because these both stay until end of turn. So that weapon will swing for an extra 8 with Dominate and draw 2. So a very good combo of cards here, but they're both individually strong on their own. We're playing 2 Singeing Steel Blades. We don't love Reprise in this deck, and we're trying to avoid it if possible. But these are kind of nice. We can bring them out against decks that aren't going to block a lot. But if we think the opponent's going to be blocking fairly often, we'll keep these in. And it's a nice way for 1 resource to find this Glint the Quicksilver. So Singeing Steel Blade, I should say, it costs 1. It's an attack reaction. You give a weapon +1. But if the opponent is defending with a card from hand, you search for an attack action and banish it. You can play it this chain link. So normally, not always, but a lot of times you can find this Glint the Quicksilver if you don't have Go Again already. It costs 0. You'll banish it. It gives target weapon Go Again, and Reprise will trigger because it has to if you've already found it with Reprise. And this Reprise says if they're defending with a card from hand, you draw a card. Really nice combo there. Remember, Singeing Steel Blade can also find Blade Runner. It can also find Out for Blood. So it can find other stuff as well, but don't keep it in against decks that are never blocking you, because then the reprise is pretty bad. But against decks that are going to be blocking you, it's good to have in. We've got 1 Remembrance to shuffle 3 actions back. Those actions are usually going to be Spill Bloods or Steelblade Supremacies, and maybe Spoils of War. We have the Glints we talked about. We have Warrior's Valor, red and blue. This costs 1 and gives your next attack either +1 or +3. And if it hits, it gains Go Again. Pretty solid. It's kind of the worst of the Go Again, just because the Go Again's conditional on it hitting. But it does make your opponent want to block from hand, which can sometimes trigger these reprise. Pursuit of Knowledge is interesting. I wasn't sure on this at first, but I can kind of see where it comes in. So basically, it's just a blue. But in the late game, when you cycle back to it after you pitched it early, it's a 2 for 4 that has a relevant on hit. So I don't think this is like a necessary card, and it's super replaceable if you think there's something better. But it's just kind of nice to have later to give yourself a big intellect turn after you've cycled back to it. We have 2 Time Snap Potion. Dorinthea's always liked playing potions. When you destroy this, you gain 2 action points. So this also plays around Prism, but it also just lets us do bigger turns where we can get extra action points. Lastly, we're playing these, or last for the blues, I should say. I'm going to go over the defense reactions next. We've got these 3 Biting Blades. Biting Blade is a 2 cost, so it's mostly just going to be a blue that blocks for 3. But when we do play it, it's a 2 cost attack reaction that gives a weapon +1. The reprise is, if the defending hero is defended with a card from hand this chain link, weapons you control gain +1 until end of turn. So if you play this on the first attack and your opponent has triggered reprise, it'll give that weapon attack +2. Your next weapon attack will also get +1, and if you get a third weapon attack in, it'll get +1 as well. So pretty solid rate. You could even maybe see the reds, but the problem is this deck really doesn't like playing any 2 cost cards. You can see basically the only 2 cost cards are these like Prism Breakers and these Pursuit of Knowledges that are for late game. We just are really kind of lean on our numbers, and we don't want to be playing expensive cards. Lastly, just looking at our fence reactions, you can see them right here. We've got 3 Sink Below, 2 Unmovable, and 3 Steel Blade Shunt. The best part about Steel Blade Shunt is it's a 1 cost defense reaction, which means we can play it off of a Tunic counter, and it's a 1 for 6. And if it's defending a weapon, it deals 1 damage to the attacking hero, so you can even kill your opponent with it sometimes. These are obviously for when we're playing against aggro decks. If they're not a go tall aggro deck, you don't need those unmovables. You can just bring in these Steel Blade Shunts and Sink Belows. But against go tall aggro decks like the new Starvo, you'll bring in these unmovables as well. I believe that is this whole list. I think I've kind of explained the game plan pretty well, but if you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments. We're kind of in a mid-range style deck where we're getting in damage, but we're also blocking a little and using Valiant Dynamo to block as well. I'm trying to block with Valiant Dynamo every turn, so we're trying to get damage in still and make sure we attack with each weapon once so that we can at least, turn Valiant Dynamo on and remove that counter from it. But you got to play around. If you need to block all out, that's fine as well. If you have to, you have to. But it's really kind of like this mid-range style deck that's blocking and attacking. I know you all like when I kind of look at numbers, so we're just going to look at the price of this deck because Flesh and Blood is expensive. And we're just going to see how expensive this deck actually ends up being. So we've got $719 right now. It actually would have been a lot more, but Skullcap, was reprinted in Everfest, so all the way down to $90. I remember when I bought my Skullcap for like $240, so definitely down a lot. And I think the other expensive cards are probably these Command and Conquers that are still like $100 a piece. Valiant Dynamo went up because this deck got popular, so Valiant Dynamo used to be like 50, but is 100 now. I know I'm not trying to like be a finance channel. I'm just kind of talking about how expensive the game is. And because of that, I'm just going to clear cart here, and we're going to look at this cheaper version here. This is a fairly budget version. It's using Centauri Saber instead of AXES because the AXES version needs a lot of these expensive cards. It needs like Tunic. It's pretty much the only option. So this version lets us play Courage of Bladehold. I'm not going to do a whole deck tech this again because they're already going to be getting to my 20-minute mark, and I don't like to go over that. But the deck's fairly similar. It's got a few differences like this Slice and Dice, and it doesn't have Spill Blood. But it's almost exactly the same deck except these equipment are a little different. But honestly, the deck is still really solid. It still has a lot of legs, and I think you would have a good bit of success on this deck. So we're just going to look at the difference here. I think the other one was a little over 700, and this one's 165, right? This is before optimization. I think when I optimized it, it was like 120 or somewhere around there. The expensive cards are still going to be, unfortunately, the equipment. We've got like I believe Courage of Bladehold is like $40. It's going to be in here somewhere, or not. I just scrolled right up past it, obviously. But it's going to be somewhat expensive. Yeah, Courage is 40 right here. But yeah, it's obviously a lot cheaper, and you'll get almost the entire core if you wanted to start with this deck and then upgrade. You have pretty much the entire main deck at this point. Like, this is literally 3 to 6 cards different. You would just have to start upgrading these equipment, basically, when you want to go to AXES. But really strong deck. I think it's a great choice right now if you want to go to the Pro Quest, and you kind of want to play something different if you're someone that doesn't like to play the meta. I'd say the meta right now is like Starvo, Prism, Viscerai, Chain, and then you saw the video I posted recently. If you haven't, go check it out. Kind of goes over the first weekend of Pro Quest and what decks performed well. But I put Dorinthea in A tier, and I think she's a great kind of dark horse pick still. Let me know what you think about Dorinthea. She was my first hero in Blitz, actually, so she's still got a soft spot in my heart, I should say. But remember to like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time.